The input help, or F4, is a standard function of the SAP system that allows the user to display a list of possible values for a screen field. A value can be directly copied to an input field by selecting it from the list. Fields that have input help are shown in the SAP system by the input help key to the right of the field. This key appears as soon as the cursor is positioned on the corresponding screen field. The help can be started either by selecting the input help key or with function key F4. If the number of possible entries for a field is very large, you can limit the set of values displayed by entering further restrictions. The possible entries are displayed with further useful information about the value shown. This feature is especially useful if the field requires the entry of a formal key. As the input help is a standard function, it looks and behaves the same throughout the entire SAP system. The development environment therefore provides tools for attaching a standardized input help to a screen field. The precise description of the input help for a field is usually defined by its semantics. For this reason, the input help for a field is normally defined in the ABAP dictionary. The following requirements must be met by the input help of a screen field or search field. Information about the context known to the system must be taken into consideration in the input help. This includes entries the user already made in the current input template, as well as information obtained in previous dialog steps. Normally, the input help uses the context to limit the set of possible values. The input help must determine the values that can be offered to the user for selection. The data to be displayed as supplementary information in the list of possible values must also be determined. When the possible values are determined, the restrictions resulting from the context and from further search conditions specified by the user must also be taken into consideration. The input help must hold a dialogue with the user. This dialog always contains the presentation of the possible values with supplementary information in list form and the possibility to select a value from this list. A search template in which the user can define conditions for the values to be displayed is also sometimes required. If the user selects a value, the input help must return the value to the search field. The input template often contains more fields, often only display fields containing further explanatory information about the search field. The input help should also update the contents of these fields in this case.
The ABAP dictionary object search help is used to describe an input help. The definition of a search help contains the information the system needs to satisfy the described requirements. The interface of the search help controls the data transfer from the input template to the input help and back. The interface defines the context data to be used and the data to be returned to the input template when a value is selected. The internal behavior of the search help describes the value help process itself. This includes the selection method with which the values to be displayed are determined, as well as the dialog behavior describing the interaction with the user. As with a function module, search helps distinguish between the interface with which it exchanges data with other software components and the internal behavior. For function modules, the latter is defined by the source text. Like the editor for function modules, the editor for search helps also enables you to test an object. You can test the behavior of a search help without attaching it to a screen field. If a view that combines the data that is relevant for an input help is not available, you must create it in the ABAP dictionary. Maintenance views may not be used as the selection method for search helps. Normally, a database view is used. However, you should note that database views in the SAP system are always created with an inner join. As a result, only those values that have an entry in each of the tables involved are offered in the input help. Sometimes the values should be determined with an outer join. In this case, you should choose a help view as the selection method. If the selection method of a search help is client-dependent, the possible values are only selected in the logon client of user. The dialog type of a search help defines whether the dialog box for value restriction is displayed before the hit list is built. You must define the characteristics that appear on either or both of the dialog boxes as parameters in the search help. You can use all the fields of the selection method with the exception of the client field and the non-key fields of your X table as parameters. You define which parameters appear in which dialog box in what order by specifying the parameters' positions in the two dialog boxes. You can thus use different parameters or different orders in the two dialog boxes. The types of search help parameters have to be defined with data elements. These define the display in the two dialog boxes. If nothing else is defined, a parameter uses the data element of the corresponding field of the selection method. When you define a parameter of a search help, you must also define whether it is used to copy data to the input help import parameter or return data from the input help export parameter. The import and export parameters of a search help together make up the interface of the search help. The parameters of a search help can be compared with the parameters of a function module. You can also define the interface parameters that do not appear in either the hit list dialog or the dialog box for value restricting. This is useful, for example, when screen fields that do not appear on either of the two dialog boxes are to be updated when you select a value. The location from which the import parameters of a search help get their values and the screen fields in which the contents of the export parameters of the search help are returned are defined in the search help attachment. The search field is a special case. Its contents are only used in the input help if it is a search string, that is, if it contains a star or a plus, and the parameter linked with the search field is an import parameter.
A search help describes the flow of an input help. The search help can only take effect using a mechanism that attaches the search help to this field. This mechanism is called the search help attachment for the field. Attaching a search help to a field has an effect on the field's behavior. It is therefore considered to be part of the field's definition. The semantic and technical attributes of a screen field, for example, type, length, field help, and so on, are not defined directly when the input template is defined. On the contrary, only a reference to an ARBAP dictionary field, usually with the same name, is specified in the screen painter. The screen field takes on the attributes of this field from the ARBAP dictionary. The same principle is also used to define the input help of a screen field. The search help is thus attached to the ARBAP dictionary field and not to the screen field. A search help can be attached to ARBAP dictionary objects by one of the following ways. A search help can be attached directly to a field in a structure or table. The definition of this assignment is similar to that of a foreign key. You have to define an assignment between the interface parameters of the search help and the fields of the structure for which the system makes a proposal. If a field has a check table, its contents are automatically offered as possible values in the input help. The key fields of the check table are displayed. If a check table has a text table, its first character like non-key field is displayed. If you are not satisfied with the described standard display of the data of the check table, you can assign a search help to the check table. This search help is used for all the fields that have this table as a check table. You have to define an assignment between the interface of the search help and the key of the check table. The semantics of a field and its possible values are defined by its data element. You can therefore assign a search help to a data element. The search help is then available for all the fields that refer to this data element. In the assignment, you must define an export parameter of the search help for the data transfer. Attaching a search help to a check table or a data element can result in a high degree of reusability. However, there are restrictions on passing further values through the interface of the search help.
To offer a meaningful input help for as many screen fields as possible, the SAP system uses a number of mechanisms. If there is more than one search mechanism available for a field, the one that is furthest left or at the top of the above hierarchy is used. In addition to the options described for defining the input help of a field in the ABAP dictionary, you can also define it in the screen field. The disadvantage, however, is that there is no automatic reuse. By using the POV screen event, that is, process on value request, you can program the input help of a field yourself. You can adjust the design of the help to the standard help using the function modules f4if _field _value _request or f4if _int _table _value _request. However, you should check to see if the part of the input help that you programmed yourself should be implemented as a search help exit instead. You can also attach a search help to a screen field in the Screen Painter. There are some functional restrictions on this kind of attachment as compared to attachments in the dictionary. You should no longer use the input checks defined directly in the flow logic of the screen, from which all input helps are derived. In the context menu of the hit list, the technical info function is offered. It can be used to find out which of the specified mechanisms is being used. A large amount of data sometimes has to be searched in the selections for an input help. This means that the user might have to wait a long time for the possible entries to be displayed and can also result in a significant increase in the load on the system. When defining a search help, you must check whether you can take measures to optimize the access behavior for the selection method. This is especially true if the selection uses a view and therefore more than one database table. If the possible number of hit list entries is very large, you can restrict the hit list with conditions. Restricting the hit list with conditions also increases the readability of the hit list. The additional conditions can directly result from the context or can be entered in the dialog box for value restriction by the user. The performance of the input help can frequently be significantly improved by creating an index on the fields used to formulate the restrictions. If the number of entries in the selection method is relatively small, you must always check whether the selection method can be buffered.
If the selection method for a search help is a database view, the input help displays only the records for which there are entries in all the tables involved in the view, such as inner join. The set of possible entries is sometimes described by the entries in a primary table for which additional optional information is added from further secondary tables. This view of the data can be implemented with the help view in the SAP system. The same outer join logic is used for help views as for maintenance views. A help view is defined in the same way as a maintenance view. Help views can only be used as selection methods in search helps. Since the SAP system cannot pass the selection on a help view directly to the database, it has to generate its own access routines. The database view should therefore be used as selection method in preference to the help view.
The SAP system provides the following presentation forms for the input help: list box, control, which is amodal, dialog, which is modal, The list box does not provide for any further selection conditions and no further columns are displayed in the hit list. However, the list box is the most user-friendly input help for clear, one-column lists. The application developer decides whether to offer a field as a list box and stores this information in the screen painter for the corresponding field. When the user calls the list box, the data to be displayed is obtained with the input help mechanism stored in the ABAP dictionary or screen painter for the field. You can obtain more information on using the list box in the course BC 410 Programming User Dialogues. Alternatively, you can display fields that are not offered as a list box with a modeless control or with a modal dialog implemented with SAP Screen technology. By choosing Help, Settings, each user can define the variant they prefer. This presentation form is then used for all input helps for this user. The system administrator can define the default value. The control is particularly useful if more than one field is to be filled sequentially with the same input help, for example, in a table control. The hold list function starts the control from the modal help.
In the relational data model, entities are usually represented by formal keys. In real life, however, these entities are often identified by one or more of their attributes. For example, the key for a person is the personnel number. A person will generally describe another person by his or her name and possibly address. The attributes used to identify an entity can differ from one user to the next and from situation to situation. A user wants to use these attributes in an input help to define a value for a field that requires that a formal key be entered. For this reason, you need search paths that permit access to the data using non-key fields. Several different search paths should be possible for one field. A search path for a field can be implemented using a search help. To describe an input help with more than one alternative search path, a set of search helps can be combined into a collective search help in the SAP system. The append search help uses the interface of its appending objects. The append search help is in the customer namespace. Normally, the search helps included in the append search help are also created by the customer and are in the customer namespace. However, the required elementary search help might already be provided by SAP, in which case the customer only has to add it to his own append search help. Append search helps are used by SAP to improve component separation. Some SAP collective search helps, therefore, already have one or more append search helps in the standard search help. Customer enhancements should always be made by creating a separate append search help. SAP collective search helps often contain elementary search helps that are not required by all customers. The search helps you do not need can be hidden using an append search help. For this purpose, the corresponding search help must be included in the append search help and the hidden flag must be set. A search help is an object that describes an input help within the system-wide standard. In some cases, the special semantics of a field require that you deviate from this standard with regard to certain details. This can be implemented with the Search Help exit. The administration data also includes the information about the next step to be executed. The Search Help exit can now execute either preparatory actions for this step or the step itself. For example, a data selection that cannot be implemented with a select on a table or view. In the second case, the Search Help exit also changes the information about the next step to be executed. Using Search Help exits encourages non-standard solutions and make it more difficult to maintain the input help.
A parameter can be pre-assigned a value by allocating a default value. The parameter is always given this value unless it is an import parameter that is linked to a field on the screen, its module pool, or to a parameter of the including collective search help. The possible default values for search help parameters are as follows: literals, system fields, get parameters. You can use a default value to formulate a simple selection condition for a field of the selection method. Parameters of an elementary search help can be marked as pure display fields in the dialog box for restricting values. In general, import parameters that are assigned read-only fields on the screen are displayed as changeable in the dialog box.